Okay, George David Clark is the author of Reveille, winner of Miller Williams Prize and Newly Not Eternal, his latest book from LSU. With Ellis Klatt, he is co-editor of Playing with Fire, Christian Poets Reflecting on Faith and Practice. David's recent poems can be found in Agni, The Believer, the Georgia Review, the Gettysburg Review, the Southern Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, and elsewhere. The editor-in-chief and executive director of the journal 32 Poems since 2011. He is an associate professor of creative writing at Washington and Jefferson College and lives in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania with his wife and their 4 children. For my part, in addition to greatly admiring Clark's work as editor of the journal 32 Poems, I'm also enamored by how he plays with meter, rhyme, and rhythm in his poems. Each line feels like, and bear with me, a perfectly crafted, bite-sized, sugar-coated pill of delight, while also holding great connection and depth. His poems flawlessly flaunt formal techniques while still creating a poem that feels organic, lived in, and accessible, and I can't wait to hear them be read out loud. Join me in welcoming George David Clark.
Thank you, Kate. And Joey, thank you so much for having me out to see you and to visit this beautiful campus and to meet these students. You mentioned we shared an office for a little while in Lubbock, Texas, 15 years ago. This was especially fortunate for me because Joey actually seemed to know what he was doing. You know, he was doing the scholarship thing and writing, and he could teach. And all I could do was scribble little things on students' papers. That was about all I was good for. So I really learned a lot from you, Joey, and I appreciate it. I also love that you all start with a prayer at your readings, and I thought maybe I would let that inspire me to start with a prayer too. This is a prayer that I think is asking for honesty and attention, which are maybe good things to begin for any poet. It's called Kaleidoscope. Light break my eye, already fractured by desire, already splintered into squints and silvers as it's raked along a thigh, already only slivers of the wince inside my smile. Light, spit in dust, apply the mud into my sight, and cake me blind enough to witness all a pupil hides. Light, shake the iris out my eye, remind me it's a guise, and as a swatter pins a flies against the window, every lens brought flat before a broad white sky, amended from distraction to a final splendid sigh, light, ache my eye past all pretense, until its lies rinse out and I transcend it. So the book I'm reading from here, it's Newly Not Eternal. It will be a year old next week. And I've decided that my favorite way to introduce it is to talk about the cover. This is the image here. I don't know if you all can see it in the back, but it's Elihu Vedder's The Fates Gathering in the Stars. Right? So you've got Clotho here who spins the thread, and then Lachesis measures out some length of a life, and finally Atropos snips it at the determined moment. But what I love about this image is that the fates are beautiful, and they seem graceful, and they seem like totally focused on their craft. And the same seems sort of true of the sort of celestial substance that they're pulling these lives out of. It's graceful and beautiful. It's sparkly. The fates seemed maybe a little disinterested in the project, but not contemptuous of human life. And it's an image that makes me think maybe there's something about death that might be good for human beings. I've got that wasn't a joke. That was kind of a joke. The fates show up in a couple of places in this book. In different archetypal forms. And I think maybe I'll start by giving you one of those. This is Song of the Genie. I lake the drought. I bake flood off again. I make fools rich enough that for a while they fool the rich enough to dictate style. I beautify, I muscle up, I thin, I pheromone, I woo, I violin the mood, I penthouse suite in private aisle, I ease death out of view but never smile, and only ever last what's always been. The books and movies are confused, of course. It's my warm, time-worn rag that rubs your mind to force the rank wish free, voracious, blind, and magnetized to bankruptcy, divorce, exhaust fumes primed into the past-due Porsche. At last, I'd grant you, but you decline. Maybe I'll share one more of these persona fate poems. This one I owe to my daughter, who, when she was maybe 4 years old, she had an imaginary friend, and she started using this friend as like a scapegoat to say things that she knew she shouldn't be saying. Like, Mom, Becky says tonight's dinner's disgusting. Right? I love it, but Becky, yeah. She'd do that sort of thing. And I guess I got to wondering like how Becky would feel about that, and I decided like maybe the fates are hungry for human feeling, and maybe Becky doesn't mind being used this way. This is Song of the Guardian Angel. No, it's not Song of the Guardian Angel. That's a different poem in this book. This is Song of the Imaginary Friend. Give me your gall. Give me an ugly name. The fabric body of a tragic doll, yarn-haired, bug-eyed, plain. I'll take the blame. I'll think the thoughts you shouldn't claim, the bald abuse and aimless libel. I'm the cloth in Lysol used to disinfect a brain. Give me your stains and sweat, your small wet cough against my neck, your spit, your kisses mange. I'll nip back soft. My lips a waft of light against your jaw while you're asleep. I'll bare my teeth, but barely. Where a parasite might gnaw, might thieve, I only want my share of why you're lonely, Mother. God, my bite is fair. Give me the grief to which I'm heir. At the center of this collection, there's a series of poems that are addressed to my son, Henry, who was stillborn. I only got to hold him one time. He was one of a set of identical twins. So we had the really strange experience of mourning a loss and celebrating a birth at the same time. And it continues to be strange because though Henry is kind of like pure potential in our minds, the son that we never met, we get like this strange mirror of Henry as Peter grows older, of the person, at least his appearance, what he would have looked like if he had ever taken a breath. I think maybe I'll read a couple of those poems. I won't say anything about them in between, but to give you a sense of how they go. I won't read the whole series. Each one is titled Ultrasound and then Your Something. This is Ultrasound, Your Picture. Henry Thomas Clark, 10/7/2014. We framed an ultrasound of you and Peter holding hands, or almost, in the womb. Your moon-bright arms crossed in a black balloon with week and weights and heights in millimeters penciled on the side. We say it's good, that he at least was with you when you died, that unlike us, you'll never know the why of being lonely or what naked falsehood feels like in one's mind. You see its faults. To say your death was somehow grace. It's grace that spared Cain's life and later gave Eve other sons despite creation's wastes and faults. I wish you could have known love's aftertastes. I wish you'd had a chance to hate your brother. ultrasound your mirror. I wish you'd had a chance to hate your brother's charming smile. Sometimes his laugh would chafe against your own. His tears would misbehave across your cheeks. His lisp might cue your stutter. Nights in the mirror you'd have seen your lovers kiss his lips, and mornings as you'd shave, you'd nick yourself and wonder who forgave you when the face you shared caused him to suffer. No. No childhood scars will make it clearer which you are. We have the future tense for Peter. While you're left at one night less than one night old, my son without a likeness, who I can't hold or half behold, condensed to shadows in the nursery's lightless mirror. I'll read one more of those. This is skipping ahead a little ways. Ultrasound your urn. Tonight, Pete's teething on your mom's Bluetooth. He found the scissors to derange his hair. We've left the gate down and he's on the stairs, or else he's scrambled up a dollhouse roof. The crumpled books and cracker crumbs are proof he's loose. Disordered blocks, a toppled chair. Some days he's absolutely everywhere until I wish him gone, to tell the truth. Not you. You stay exactly as you're left, the tame and quiet twin. The easy one, the boy who never makes a mess, the son whose whispered name will be our shibboleth for innocence, whose only fault is done, who never cries or fights or takes a breath. So there's a good bit of grief in the background of the poems in this collection. But I hope it's offset by a number of poems that are more invested in the kind of joy that we can only experience as beings that are aware of our mortality. How about a love poem that's so little I shouldn't say anything about it? Sun on your shoulders. May this reckless sum of summer freckles, kiss by kiss, become a necklace. And then how about a Christmas poem? Or a poem for any birth? This is The First Supper. Newly not eternal, newly partly past, he's here by way of 40 weeks inside another volatile physique. He's purple, then he quickly pinks and hardly breathes before we see he's breathing fine. It's only seconds till he's at her breast, the sweet colostrum like a spurt of fresh infinity injected into time. While his mother's left hand cups his puckered feet, her right palm guides him to this cup his birth has made her. It's an image she rehearsed all night as each worse spasm struck its peak, as blood spilled, body broke, and she defeated labor so her urgent son could nurse. All right, maybe I'll just read one more poem from this book, and then I'll share a couple new things that I've been working on more recently. Joey mentioned that in the conversation that we had before this event, he was talking a little bit about some of the students that we shared and worked with in our first semester's teaching. And I can remember hardly any of the students, but I can remember a couple of the things they wrote. And one reason for that is I've, ever since I started teaching, maybe even before that, I was collecting malapropisms. My children are great at them. Student writers who are rushing through a draft, right? We all make those mistakes, and sometimes the malapropisms slip in. One that I had, at Texas Tech, was a student who was writing like a hard-boiled detective story. And there was this line at like one of the climactic moments, like, in the shadows, the bad guys upholstered their weapons, right? I loved that one, right? Another one was another like detective story where it's like for 20 pages, this guy's kid has been poisoned, and he spends like the entire story searching the town for the antidote that will restore the boy to health, right? So I was talking about this at another reading one time, and a woman came up to me afterwards. It was like a family weekend, and she was the grandmother of a student. She was in town for a family weekend, and she came up to me and told me that, like, as they were driving onto campus, she was in the car with like her son and her grandkids and everything. They were driving onto campus, and she was just thinking about like the beauty of the moment and how she never wanted to forget it. And just out of nowhere, she told the car, "I wish I had a pornographic memory." Right? So this is one of my kids have given me like a bunch of these things over the years, and this is one that my son gave me when he was young. Time is such a really difficult thing to wrap your mind around when it's a young kid, and he would call like a past event or a future event anytime that like wasn't right now but was kind of close to now. He would call it yestermorrow, right? And I got in my mind that yestermorrow would be like a time where you had no obligations. Right? It's not the weekend where you're like scrambling to get ready for the next week, but it's like time outside of time where there's just nothing you have to do. It's totally free time. Right? This is yestermorrow. Hallelujah, it's nobody's birthday, nobody's wedding, and nobody's wake. For once the glib calendar's dumb. These brave hours have sloughed off their date. No unions are striking, no voters are polled, though if anything, dawn has come early. While the coffee is yet to be ground, our displeasures dissolve prematurely. We're a people with bleachers to get to, outlets to enter, entrees to eat. But this morning it's clear to anyone, nothing's planned and there's nowhere to be. If the wind at the backs of our minds is persuasive, still each destination feels wrong. We wander outside in our boxers to stand at the edge of our lawns. Hallelujah that here on mortality's turf, the daily's been soundly defeated. The diaries are shredded inside us. The dockets have balked and retreated. Any vows we have made to each other melt away in our mouths like confections. And at once they're replaced by the knowledge that at last we're immune to deception. The day picks up its skirts with its eyes closed, eventful though nothing will count. I hear fireworks rebound one street over. The DeWitts in their front yard make out. As local balloonists are coasting their baskets to rest in the neighborhood park, our children eject from the tire swings and gently tear heaven apart. Even when dusk sizzles through the azaleas, the day feels unwilling to end. Stars flicker back out in the cypress. The moon seems inclined to descend. Hallelujah, the networks have canceled the news with no scandals, invasions, or earthquakes. What's next we'll discover in time, when eternity turns into Thursday. All right, so I think maybe I'll try a poem that always makes me a little nervous to read. I had a buddy in grad school who was writing horror, and he was asked by one of our friends, or somebody asked him this question, like, what is the scariest thing? For somebody who writes horror, what do you think is the most frightening thing? And he said the answer is other people's sex lives, right? So this is a horror poem. One thing I should say to introduce it, it's in conversation with a Galway Kinnell poem that some of you might know. After making love, we hear footsteps, right? And that poem begins, I'll butcher it, but it's something like, for I can snore like a bullhorn or stay up late talking with any reasonably sober Irishman, and Fergus will only sink deeper into his dreamless sleep, right? But let there be that stifled come cry, right? He'll wrench himself awake and make for it on the run, right? The parents are always being interrupted by the kids, right? The first house that we lived in when we moved to Pennsylvania, really old house, no locks on the doors. After making love, we hear birdsong. It's been a pretty athletic performance, if I do say so myself. And as we finish, I'm winded, just holding Elizabeth close and about to start kissing the salt off her neck when the birds pipe up at the window. All night we left it open to the breeze, more than warm already now at 6 a.m. this August Tuesday, and a motley flock has gathered on the sill just as pretty as you please. There's a blue jay thrusting his hips and warbling what sounds like lay lady lay, and there's a mockingbird with a long, clear, hot damn whistle. A cardinal couple, too, and 3 goldfinches bobbing and puffing out their chests to whoop and coo. A team of hummingbirds leer in over the other guy's shoulders, not singing themselves, of course, but flitting back and forth with their long tongues out, licking the air in what's clearly vicarious pleasure. I won't lie, it's flattering, this Disney treatment. But as I turn laughing, can you believe this, to Elizabeth? I see our tender children at the bedside with their big eyes glistening in a soft oh my, and when the 5-year-old George sees me see him, there's syrup in his smile and he says, "Daddy, that was beautiful. Mama, you are so, so beautiful. And Daddy, when you threw Mama in the air and spun her sideways, I was scared, but it wasn't danger scary, scary beautiful, and I want to be just like you when I grow up." Little Gemma goes, "Mama, you're a princess." And then she does her darling arabesque, holding one leg up behind her, tilting her head. From Jim, that means pure respect. Baby Peter's too little to talk or even crawl, but he's rolled in here somehow, and he's on his back just giggling and cheesing the way he does when he's freshly nursed, and I tickle his soft round belly and sing. That kind of support makes me think maybe we're doing something right as parents. But still, it's our children. So I reach back to pull the sheet up over our nakedness, and then there are our neighbors, Bill and Sharon, in the doorway with these huge grins on their faces, and Bill's giving me the big thumbs up. And Sharon, flush, says, "Wow, you two, wow." And there's our mailman, Mike, behind them on tiptoe, and still others behind him, some of them hooting, and one woman calls out she was worried we'd snap the headboard. And then everyone's laughing and cheering and acting out their favorite parts in slow motion, right there in our upstairs hallway. And Elizabeth and I are laughing too now, humbled by the generous applause, but also proud and a little relieved, finally, to be recognized for this gift we always knew was special. Then in a blitz, the birds are swirling through the room, landing on the dresser and night table and the bookshelves. Snowy owls and a cockatiel and 2 swans by the dirty clothes basket, nodding their necks in a bow and fluting. Last, this peacock that must weigh 50 pounds comes sailing in, screeching a half-baked rapture that chills us all as he fans his tail and quivers mightily. And in the midst of this display, Elizabeth rises, smiling that coy Queen of the Moon smile of hers, and she takes my hand and pulls me up, and we bow, and I don't know if it's sweat and the shine of exertion or what, but our hair and our loins and our eyes and our teeth and everything's glowing. So I read that poem at the Arkansas Festival of the Book this past year, and my father-in-law had come to see me read. And I didn't think about it until I was like a stanza into the poem that this is going to be really uncomfortable to read in front of my father-in-law. And he never said anything about it. He just sat there, but he did not laugh, absolutely did not laugh. I know, I was looking. He didn't think it was funny. So the book I think I'm working on now, I'm calling it The Human Beings. And I think I'm trying to figure out what the Imago Dei is, right? If human beings carry the image of God, what is that? And I don't know that I know the answer, but I think I'm trying to wrestle with that in some of the poems I'm writing now. This is one called On the Subject of the Navel. Very little has been written on the subject of the navel. Holy books and histories ignore it to their shame. Great works of literature are less great for their silence on the matter. And with scarcely a cursory paragraph devoted to its news, the thickest textbooks of anatomy no less than simple lovers. Fine by the belly button, furtive as a serval. When a summer noon interrogates it in a poolside beach chair, mutely but at length, it beads a teensy drop of sweat, as though it guards a scandal, which it does. Confidant of smudged redactions, second cousin to the censor's bleep, it's earned a blank diploma from the College of Oblivion, where every question's solved with zero, false, or none of the above. It's one of nowhere's diplomatic attachés, a spy. It's fed on the absence that came before each of us, so it understands nothing better than anyone. How to plumb those unfathomable shallows. How to work loose its impossible knot. Like any scar that grows up to be beautiful, my beloved's flinches from attention. It shies when I reach toward it, unless first I coax her smile. You're the smallest cultivar of tulip, I say, in whose tiny pearl-pink bloom could sleep a single amber honeybee. I lay a finger at its rim and promise I will only purse my lips against your empty doll-sized shot glass when I'm finished with sobriety forever. On and on like that. Eventually she's willing, and I cautiously lean in, offering my ears to a wire and tin can telephone. On the other end, static. Then the conch shell's version of ocean, a black hole murmuring from its hammock of stars, and gray moths and spider skeins, sighing and sighing. It's a thrill to overhear the fluent vacancies conversing. But finally, like music, the void defies transcription. No one sees through it. Not even this bit we each wear in our hulls like an open porthole. Of course our libraries are dumb. We'll never decipher the sentence it ends. The mile upon mile of illegible angel graffiti scrawled in the darkest alleys of the womb. Yet maybe it wouldn't be worthless to look very hard at this soft punctuation and attempt to resolve its tone. Not perhaps a final ellipsis, but the point of a vast exclamation. We've been talking a lot about AI lately at my college. I had 5 plagiarism cases last semester. I've never had more than like 1, maybe 2 in a year before, and I had 5 plagiarism cases, including one in a creative writing class last semester. Right, a plagiarized ChatGPT sonnet. Right, it was exactly what you would think it would be. I'm not terribly afraid of like the poems that AI will write, and they may even be beautiful someday. That may write beautiful poems. But I'm really kind of terrified of a world that would want AI to write our poems for us. The kind of culture that would be willing to turn over that thing to AI. And it's with that in mind that I wrote this poem. This is the last poem made by a human being. The last poem composed without AI did not begin with an epigraph from Scripture or Shakespeare. It didn't allude. Not a love lyric, it didn't describe the soft wisps of blonde hair behind the beloved's ear, or how afternoon sun through oak boughs dappled the skin on her shoulder. Not one of its lines recalled the sensation of breezes that billow out shirt sleeves and the tails of blouses, that flirt with the hems of bright-colored dresses. It did not celebrate the shadows of suspension bridges on the muddy backs of rivers, nor did it cherish flying buttresses made of gray stone, serpentine walls, stained glass, or parquet floors inlaid with cherry wood. It did not celebrate. It could have narrated a voyage to an island where rubies mature in the soft white wombs of coconuts. It could have dreamed. It could have recalled the poet's childhood, how his collie dug under the fence and found poison in a neighbor's tool shed, how with his mother he held her, whispering in her ear as she whimpered and died. It could have, but of course it didn't. It did not condescend to description, to story. It did not advance an argument about the beauty of women and men, the gracefulness of hands, the candor of eyes in their countless expressions, the elegance of spines, of hips, of clavicles, the terrible heights and depths of our songs, the weightless, unwieldy, burdensome lightness of the old Imago Dei. It did not argue, nor was it beautiful, and it did not last long, a little more than a page, but still long enough to do pretty much what those terminal poems around it were doing. To remember the crimes of rich men carrying briefcases, to successfully prosecute the language, stripping her naked, revealing her lies, to pick a ball of black lint from its colorless navel, to pose a few jokes not intended for laughter, and to gaze through a smartphone camera, to gaze at itself and sigh. I'll end with one more prayer. With the pink hydrangea heads ogling. Even under these layers, I feel your gray hand lay the question like ice on the nape of my mind, and suddenly, now that you've asked it a 10,000th time on this nearly dawned Tuesday, I'm ready to answer. I throw back the sheets and shed my old t-shirt and boxers. To peel off my house, I climb on the bed, clinch the cord on the fan, and drag it downstairs like an oversized zipper, the walls parting clean with a churr and a gasp. Yes, sir, it's cold out, naked and pale in a puddle of real estate with the pink hydrangea heads ogling. But see how the air togas over my shoulder, fold after fold after fold. Transparencies, too, are constricting. As heavy sometimes as the whole natural world, I have to bow all the way down to feel for the hem of the universe, fringed like new grass and as dewy and soft. I'm lifting it over my head now, the chill of it slicking my thighs and my ass, the pines upside down and rising, the planets and constellations and my ugly polka dot self rolling past. Thank you all so much. So I think now we've got a few minutes to take Q&A, which would be great if anyone has any questions. Yes.
I noticed reading the samples you're given in the bio that there definitely seems to be a lot of restrictions in this song. So I wanted to ask, what extent do you draw inspiration from?
I would say pretty heavily. You know, it's the sort of thing that this is going to be the second time I mentioned Project Runway in one day. I think about Project Runway, once a month or something like that, and it triggered a poem. At one point, I wrote a Project Runway poem. I think about my faith every single day, right? Almost maybe there are some days I don't. I think just about every single day. I start the day spending some time reading scripture, or it's a part of many conversations my family has over dinner, and it's just it's always in the background of my life. So it finds its way into poems all the time. I actually kind of have to protect against it as an editor. Like I'll often notice, we've got 32 poems in every issue of 32 poems, and I'm like 15 poems in, and like 11 of them deal with faith. I'm like, oh, I need to really put the brakes on that. Like it's it's something that I'm obsessed with, and if I'm not careful with it, it kind of becomes a crutch. So more than anything, I kind of have to be on the lookout that that's not just it's a button I press to try to find some transcendence in a poem, that I need to come to it naturally and in fresh ways, but it's always in the background of my imagination. Yes, in the back. I try to have like a set time that I'm ready and available for the muse if the muse shows up. So my kids wake up at 7, and if I can get up and get started at 5 o'clock, I know that I've got a little uninterrupted time. Right? But if I miss that, it starts to be really hard for me to find some time in the day that I can devote to that. So I have a set time, and if I am stuck, if I don't have something that I already know that I want to write about, I usually read poets that I love, and there are some that I feel like I can go to, and if I read a handful of poems, I'll have something that I'm wanting to write about. I don't know that I always know when a poem is finished. If I've worked through a dozen drafts or something, and I feel like I'm not making many changes. Sometimes I think that I'm through with it, and then I set it aside for a while and come back later and find that there's still more that can be done to make it better. I've also got a group of friends that I workshop with. So this Sunday night we've got a meeting, and each of us will contribute a poem. We don't prepare anything in advance. We don't prepare comments on each other's work, but we'll talk through it. Like I'll read my poem and then ask them a few questions that I'm wondering about, and they'll give me some advice, and then we'll just kind of each of us share something. They help me find when a poem's done, and then sometimes I think a poem's done. I send it out to magazines, and no one bites, and it becomes clear that it's not done when it fails. And then sometimes someone does bite and it still fails. And I see it in print and realize that I should have cooked it for a little bit longer. But I don't know that I have a good answer for how to know with certainty that something's finished.
I'll try to talk loud, but for context, I was in the Shakespeare class, and when we were reading through the play, she said, yes, we're going to read these this semester, we're going to analyze them, they're going to sound so beautiful, but like you just have to remember that they were not written to be read, they're written to be performed, and on the stage that's what they were meant for. And like I can't help but like hearing you read your poems and not be biased towards thinking that poetry was not meant to be read, it's meant to be read out loud by its author. Like it just, I don't know, there's just some sort of like incantatory something that happens. And so I don't know, I love like your advice for like when a poem is dislocated from you and like you no longer have that kind of, you can't like control, like how do you make sure it's still like injected with that magic?
Yeah, I mean, sound is a huge part of what's interesting to me in a poem, and I can't write without speaking it. I'm sure this is true of others too. The poet James Arthur, he will go on long walks and he'll recite the poems to himself. He doesn't write them down first. He will get a whole draft of a poem just by saying the lines to himself over and over again as he takes a walk. I don't walk, but I will like put my hand over my mouth, and like if I'm in public or somebody can see me. My wife, if I'm like working upstairs in our bedroom and she comes upstairs, she'll say she doesn't go into the bedroom because she can hear me speaking like parcel tongue, right? Which is like I'm trying to hear the words as I'm writing. I'll be saying the lines to myself. And I think if the poem is successful, that it gets onto the page. And I know that with many of my favorite poets, I can hear the poems aloud, even if I'm reading them silently. And even if I've never heard the poet read, there are some poets who I love, and I feel like I know their voice. There have even been some times where I feel like I know their voice, and I've gone to hear them read, and I'm like, oh, they did that a little wrong. right? It's that you're supposed to say it like that. Does that make like, because I've inhabited the poem so long in my own head, most of the time I have the experience that you're describing, though, where it's the poems, to hear someone perform the poems or to resonate the poems in person is a thrill. Yeah.
So I'll try to talk about it, but do you like go into a writing session like, oh, I know what I want to write a poem about, and then you like brainstorm your things, and you just kind of like let it happen, or you just kind of approach the blank page and let it happen? I don't know if it's opposed to your
I've done different ways too at different points in my life. My time is pretty pinched most days now, and I rarely find that I have like writing time where I don't already kind of have an idea of what I want to write about. And I've got like a notebook that I'll keep in my back pocket, and when I have like an idea or something, I'll make notes there. But I usually sit down and already kind of know the poem I want to write, or I have an idea of where I want to start, anyways. And usually the poem a sign that the poem might be working is that it rapidly moves to something else, so that I'm not still writing the same thing I thought I was going to sit down to write. But I don't usually start with a blank page and have no idea what I'm going to put on it. I usually have an image or it's an idea or something that seems like the beginning of a poem. And then in the process of trying to get a draft onto the page, it might go in a lot of different directions. Yes? Yeah, well, I shared a couple of poems that I felt like I got from my kids that they've given me. They've also probably stolen a lot of poems, to be completely honest. There are poems that would have existed that don't, as a result of having children. But that is a really good trade, actually, to trade poems for human beings. I recommend it. And my kids have given me some really wonderful poems. I don't write a whole lot about my own life, and the exception would be like the Henry poems. And usually when my kids show up in poems, they're transformed. They're not really anything like the actual people who are alive. But I mean, one thing they've done is they've made me care about things that I didn't care about before I had kids. See if I can think of a good example. Birds was one. I was never really into birds. I mean, birds were fine, but I didn't know anything about birds. My oldest, who's 14 now, he wants to be an ornithologist. And his love of birds has made birding a thing that like our family does all the time. And I've written a number of poems that include, birds have come into the poems in a way that they wouldn't have without him introducing me to a side of the world that I didn't know would give me a lot of pleasure. I saw a hand here, and then there's another one in the back there. Maybe we've got time for two more. Yeah. Gosh, it's hard for me to answer that because I think I've been a poet for a really long time now. Even when I was like in junior high and high school, I didn't think that I would, go into writing professionally or anything like that. I wanted to be a doctor when I went to college, even in junior high and high school, I would like scribble little notes, and I could remember like a song of like nonsense words that I would kind of hum to myself when I was riding my bike around the neighborhood as a kid, and I grew up in a home where there were lots of books, and I loved the way that words sounded. So I think I've kind of been stuck on language for a really long time, and I can't remember a time before it. So I'm not sure that I could answer how it's changed my experience, but that I think the two are deeply connected. That if I didn't have poems and language to wrestle with, I think a lot of my personality would be frustrated if I didn't have that way of expressing myself. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think, I mean, this is a weird answer, but I think not by thinking about your poem, but like maybe reading other things. Right? Just reading everything you can is the way you're going to find the words. And I mean, it's never been easier to look up words you don't know. Yet I have such a hard time getting my students to look up words. I teach only undergraduates, but I mean, they've got a dictionary on their phone and like 2 keystrokes they could get to the word, but it's hard to get them to look it up. But maybe developing that habit that says, anytime I see a word I don't know, I want to add it to my toolkit. Reading a lot and searching out the tools that you don't have yet. Yeah. But all the time, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that the words seem well chosen, but I feel like I'm constantly frustrated by I don't know what the word is. I asked my wife the other day, is there another word for lace? Any of you know another word for lace? I tried filigree, but filigree sounds so pretentious and fancy. I needed something not filigree. But that was where I went too. But I don't know. I'm stuck on another word that suggests lace that isn't filigree. Yeah. What? Yeah. So afterwards, find me if you've got a good alternate for lace. But I guess I feel the same thing you're feeling, that I'm constantly stuck trying to find the right word and not being able to nail it. Yeah, maybe we've got time for one more. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part. Oh, yeah, that might be too long for me to answer at this point. But I'll say, if you like that poem, check out Michael Laver's poem, "A Machine Designed to Hunt Mammoths." Is that the title? Yeah, check out that poem. Yeah. All right, I'll stop there. Thank you all.